This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Tonight we are talking about first drafts. So, pretty straightforward topic. What is your starting point when you're past the journaling, pre-writing, outlining phase and you're ready to start drafting? What does that look like for you?
Ooh, sometimes it's, it's funny, isn't it? Because there are people who love first drafts but hate editing, and people who hate first drafts and love the revision process, and I'm the latter. I really find that I procrastinate, and so I really do. This is where the writing routine and just getting in there, and as long as I do find Rachel Aaron's 5K to 10K book incredibly helpful here, because there was one little thing that she said in there, which is she takes 5 minutes before she gets down to drafting to just put a few bullets down about what she wants to do with that particular scene or chapter or whatever that particular part is. And that helped me so much that I actually went back into a couple of my other books when I was outlining them, and went back to excruciating detail, scene by scene, and writing out what the goal was, what the disaster was, what the conflict was, what the dilemmas were, where that resulted. And that really helped me, I think, as perhaps a newer writer, going, what were the points I wanted to hit, so you can tell I'm a very a logical, need to know what happens person. I'm not a very intuitive writer in that sense, so it's hard for me to get flow going without knowing where I'm heading. Once I do that, then definitely I can sit there and spew out the words, and I'm really good at not correcting anything. I don't go back. And now that I'm doing more dictation, that's a different experience again. And apparently it takes quite a while for your voice to come through. And I really like what Scott Baker said. He wrote How to Train Your Dragon. So Dragon being probably the most prolific, most widely used, dictation software. He said, think about how much time we've learned trying to get stories from our head into either a pen and paper, or now into across a keyboard and onto a screen. And people say, well, I can't get to dictation because I'm not used to doing it that well. Of course not. You've probably spent 20 years learning to type it out, whether you type or not, or more even. And so when you're dictating, you have to learn to then tell your story out, and it does come out differently for me anyway to start with. And so I've learned that, for example, dialogue is awesome. Movement is awesome when you're dictating, because you can get up, you can move around, you can be places. But description is rubbish. It just comes out like some pure old eight-year-old's essay. And so I learned that in my revision process, I've got to do something different. And I've had to really let go of that, because I want my first drafts to be perfect, and it's just stupid.
There is no such thing.
Yeah, exactly. But I was brought up reading these wonderful books. I'm a whale reader. I read, and for years I just thought that's how people wrote. I had no idea that they would go through this sort of blurt of, vomit on the page to start with, and then slowly hone that into a masterpiece with the help of editors, with the help of other readers and critics. So it's taken me a long while to let go of the fact that the first draft can be complete rubbish, and I certainly don't show it to anybody, but it frightens me because I want things to be so good.
Right.
So yeah, procrastination is my enemy.
Right. Well, and anyone who still believes that stories just come out fully formed on the page in one draft should go look up Anne Lamott's expletive first drafts.
Yes.
Just Google that. You can find PDFs of it online, but it's Anne Lamott's bleep first drafts. And she talks all about that. So what are first drafts like for you, Kathryn?
They have been a process. I've been learning kind of about what that looks like for me. I used to just, here's an idea, start typing and go. And I would get to the end. I've never, well, I shouldn't say never. I don't remember a time when I haven't hit the end and put the end on the end of whatever draft I'm drafting. But I originally it was all discovery writing, and then you learn, oh, discovery writing, that's great and all, but plot, you should plot. So then I started plotting, and I got to the point where I was so nitty gritty that I didn't care. So I didn't write it at all. So now I'm kind of in this really happy medium that I've found that I draft very, very, very quickly. I'm a very fast typer. I do not have dictation anything yet, but I am fascinated by it and eventually will probably do it. And I can sit down and just spend an hour and a half and get 36 to 4,500 words down, and they're fine, and I move on. Fine in terms of I've accomplished whatever the scene or the chapter needs to accomplish, and I can move into the next one.
Right.
And I've found that I use like brainstorming software, so I just do like bubbles and connect them all by arrows, and it's really fun. And I will have a sentence for like a chapter, which will have maybe 3 or 4 scenes in it, but the sentence will say, well, this happens, and this happens.
Yep.
And then I just go in and I just make it happen. And I usually stick very close to whatever my very brief bullet points are. But it'll just say conflicts arise in the city. And so I have a lot of free reign during that writing session to do anything, but it has to stay within that little, okay, well, I'm not leaving the city, or something like that, or different characters that I have going on. But yeah, and so I managed a first draft very, very, very quickly. And then it's interesting to see kind of what happens. I end up with a lot of organic like backstory and things happening that, by the end of the first draft, I know a lot more than I did at the beginning. Right. And so then going back to the beginning, it turns into a lot of, okay, so pull from here, pull from here, pull from here. And I'm much slower at revision and rewriting. My first draft may take me a month. My second draft, I'm still towards the beginning of my second draft for the book I drafted in August, and it's now December.
Yes.
So
that's still pretty fast, though. I mean,
well, I'm very much at the beginning. It took me a long time to pull all the threads together of what I wanted, but it's good because I think that I get a lot of ideas out, and I generate a lot of passion and excitement in my own brain.
Right.
And I whip out, this, it's usually pretty small compared to what the ultimate manuscript will be, but I will just whip something out, and then it's a complete story, so I can go back and start making it
and flesh it out.
That's right.
I like that distinction. There's complete, and then there's good.
Right. Yes. And it's not good, but it's complete. So I have all my components. I just need to make them better. So,
yeah. I like a much more fleshed out first draft than you. I think I use my storyboarding process, so I've got more of the specifics of each chapter, and I know what each chapter's climax is going to be before I write. But then when I sit down and write, I have the freedom to move within that and also without that. So if something changes as I'm writing, if some discovery happens, there could very well be a domino effect that changes everything after that, or even some of the stuff before that. And I give myself permission to do that, but that storyboard gives me those markers I need to hit along the way, So I spend a fair amount of time with each chapter, not trying to get it perfect, but trying to get it, full. Not done. It still needs a lot of revision. But if I can write, 10 pages in a sitting, then I'm happy. That's really good, because I'm thinking a lot as I write, and I'm choosing my words, and I'm really pulling those threads together as I put it on the page, instead of doing a fast draft and then pulling it all together later.
Right. So you would say that yours is probably a cleaner first draft for that reason then. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably is a cleaner first draft. I mean, far from done, but
no,
more closer to full and fleshed out. And, you know, if I see an idea, if I see some development in chapter 5 that's going to affect things later, then it plays out later, so I don't just make a note, go back and, you know, repair that. I kind of have to do it as I go so that it makes the work later smoother.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Yeah, so you know, I get the same feeling as that, because something will occur to me, and I'll. Okay, so it's different with dictation, so I need to figure out how to do that. But if I was doing it in Scrivener, which is what I would normally do, then I would just put a note in that particular file, just to, later on, you know, Rodriguez needs to blah blah blah, and then dismiss it from my mind. Yeah. Because otherwise, I am not good at staying away from rabbit holes. So otherwise I might find out 2 hours later I've researched the hell out of submachine guns, but I haven't written an extra word, you know.
Right. So. Right. Well, that is one of my hells. Like writing my historical books, I would get to, you know, like the character's getting dressed and I don't know what her hat would look like, because now it's 1869 instead of 1867, and then I have to stop writing and go do research and then come back to put like 3 words in a sentence to describe the hat. But it was like I could not write on until I had that hat. It was a little bit painful and a little bit fun as well, because I like the research and I like knowing, and I like having it in there and having it right and not having to flag everything as I go. So it's kind of a dual-edged sword there for me.
Right.
Yeah, I suppose if you're productive and efficient with it and you're still keeping word count up, then you might be saving time. And, you know, if you're writing a cleaner first draft, then you might be saving revision time. I suppose it's important for writers to understand themselves, as you said, you know thyself.
Right.
Because you can, those research things can actually prevent a draft getting out. And it sounds like in your case it doesn't. It just brings in the revision process slightly earlier. And maybe also you have to be careful, I suppose, because I think it might have been David Wright was talking about this on the SPP podcast, that they have a big argument. I think Sean Platt says, no, just doesn't matter, make it up. You know, you can fix it in post type thing. And Dave's saying, well, but if it's an integral part of the plot, and I've written the entire story based on the fact that the gun only fires this way, and then I go back and I find out that it never does, then I've just ruined my story. And I think to a degree I'm with him on that. Right. You know, I think there are some things that just trip you up and think, okay, I need to get this right before I waste words.
Right. Well, and I think you need to know what is going to give you a better sense of flow and continuity. You know, for some writers, it's going to be the speed of drafting and just having all those flags. But for me, it's getting it right as I go, so then I can take it out of my brain and say it's done. Because with all of those flags, and I do plenty of that, then you have to go back and make sure you get them right and that everything is, you know, properly fixed so that you don't screw it up in a way that the reader will notice later. And so, you know, I feel a better sense of continuity and flow if it's done and I don't have to revisit that issue, whereas other people, that would disrupt their flow of creating the draft, you know?
Yeah, it does me, definitely. And because I enjoy the revision process so much, I quite like deconstructing everything after and then making all the moving parts. Well, I mean, I'm not saying you don't. It's just that we're, you know, it is such a personal thing, isn't it? You know, on any Facebook group you go on and someone says, you know, how long does it take you to write your first draft? And you'll just get, for 100 answers, you'll get 200 different ways of doing it, because even every person does it differently every draft. So it's kind of interesting. It's I mean, that is where it comes down to art. It's like, to me, I've always thought about, once I realized that people didn't do something perfect first time around. And then realized, oh, it's like sculpting. You know, you're going to have a block, and you're going to not carve Michelangelo's, you know, whatever, you know, you're not going to carve a Venus de Milo straight away. You're going to shape it. You're going to do rough casts first. You're going to come back. You're going to revisit it, and you know, maybe you're going to completely stuff it up and knock a limb off, and you'll have to get another block of rock and start again. But that's how art is, you know.
Right, and I think they usually start with small models and build their way up to the giant, expensive block of marble, you know?
That's why I went wrong.
Right. Start manageable, and then, yes.
Which is why writing exercises are really helpful, aren't they? And when I was talking before, and the difference between doing those bullet points, as Rachel Aaron suggests, there's another dictation book that I will try and I'll remember it and then get the notes for the show, Kathryn, because I can't remember the name of it now. I only just started reading it, but it is fantastic. He's taken Scott Baker's work and then taken it down to what is the psychology of training yourself to dictate. And there's some brilliant things in there, such as warming up by reading something dictating something in your genre that's already written, that's already perfect, that already has the lingo, just for 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes even, gets your voice up, it gets your mind trained to be doing that, like a writing exercise. And then you should always dictate your own work anyway, because so if you've got pre-written work, you want to be dictating that to get the feel of how your work sounds spoken. So you've got your own voice in your head as well. But doing something that's similar to yours, so you can just practice and warm up. I thought that was fantastic. And then, like the 5 bullet points or whatever that, you know, we might use when we're actually typing, you do the same, just thinking out loud with your dictaphone. So I have literally dictated. I was sitting on the side of on the Mediterranean, planning out what I was going to dictate, and then I'd switch that off and then start the next file and then start dictating. And I found that was eye-opening as well, that you don't have to think, oh yeah, I've got to make it up as I go along. No, you could have pre-made it up, and in which case don't jot it down. Well, I did jot it down, but then instead of just going from jotting it down to then speaking it out loud, pre-speak out loud a framework. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to have Indy kind of get caught up in a fight with some other space pirate, then I'm going to blah blah blah, and it's fantastic. It just gets in your head, and after that it's easy.
I've been training my dragon recently, and so I've been writing scenes out longhand because I like to do that, especially early in a first draft when you know, that kinesthetic connection really helps me with the creative flow. And then later when the story is really rolling, it's easier to go straight to the keyboard and compose on the keyboard. But so with the dragon, because it's so new to me, I've been writing longhand and then dictating those scenes off of the longhand pages, just to get used to speaking it and also to train the dragon, you know.
Yes, I do that pre-first draft. I outline by hand, because I think pen and paper is still such a wonderful creative tool.
It is.
And it, for me, is still more. And I think it's something to do with the framing of a computer screen. You know, you're in a box, and so when I know paper is obviously a limited space as well, but there's something about, you can go sitting in your living room, or you can go to a cafe or whatever, so I will handwrite that, and then I've got into the habit of then dictating the outline into the computer, so that I now have a log of it, and that really helps as well, start to sort of cement it in your head.
Right.
And it's more dictation practice. So, and as Scott Baker says, the more you practice anything, even dictating texts, I started doing that more now. It's a different skill to typing.
It is, definitely. And handwriting has been shown. So, okay, hang on. Printing, cursive, and typing on a keyboard are all associated with distinct and separate brain patterns. When you compose text by hand, people consistently produce more words and express more ideas. Brain imaging suggests that the connection between writing and idea generation goes even further. So that's from a paper by Virginia Behringer that I quote in the How to Use This Book and my Storyworks guides. So there's definitely a lot to be said for using handwriting in your pre-writing and first draft stage.
Yeah, which and this I mean we haven't spoke about revision, but I really like printing out a copy and then writing all over it for that reason as well.
Oh, definitely, I do too. Yeah. All right. Anything else we want to say about first drafts and drafting? The fun, the fury,
I think,
the process.
I mean, you just have to get it is a dump it out thing, isn't it? However clean it comes out, it's still never going to be finished. It's the first draft for a very good reason, and so just dump it out. And it's really hard to do that when you've got a perfectly formed idea in your head, this movie that's so wonderful, and then it comes out on the page. You think, oh, that's crap.
Well, I mean, your first draft is unlimited possibilities. You may have the story in your brain, but you haven't written. There's nothing written in stone yet. You can do whatever you want. So it's that dump it out, get it down, get yourself something to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. There's something in my eyes suddenly. It's like
Alida's crying with joy. She loves first drafts so much.
I just adore my first drafts. They're so wonderful. the whole process. My pencil. All right. Well, sorry. Yeah. For anyone watching the video, I'm trying. Having a little issue here with my eye. So on that note. Thank you so much for listening to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Find show notes and more at storyworkspodcast.com. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.